that one's going to be
7 days only saltwater.
Getting ready for a walking tour of Maastricht, Netherlands.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a nice day.
Hello.
And we're off.
The old medieval town had a lot of gates to enter the city. One of them was right on this place because there was a harbor where we could get the goods in from the ships. So this little ice saloon that we see nowadays, this used to be the watch house. So this is where the watchmen were and guarded the city gate. And they hold the key for this city gate. And in the evening, when the gates were closed and the city was safe, all the keys were collected in the main watch, which was in the middle of the town. So this little fellow here, he's called Pique. And Pique is a character in a play that was written about 100 years ago. And it plays in the time that this street was the street where all the workmen for the ceramic factories lived. So Maastricht was big in ceramics. We had two big factories making ceramics here in Maastricht. Commercial signs, we started to place them inside the facades as well. So, for instance, here you can see a beautiful white swan. Tells something about the history of this building and what it used to be in the past time. Well, a swan in medieval times meant there were pretty little birds in there for the men. Yeah. So when you see a swan, that meant there were girls in there for your pleasure. So, yeah. So instead of the red light district in Amsterdam, we had swans. What you'll see here in Maastricht, differently from the rest of the Netherlands, most of the Netherlands, they build their houses with red bricks, right? Because they have a lot of clay and they bake them into bricks. Here in Maastricht, we have 3 different kinds of stones that we can build with. It's the bricks, it's yellow limestone that we get from the quarries from the hills nearby. And then you have these grey stones, and the grey stone is imported from the Ardennes. So it's the most exclusive stone, it's the most expensive stone. And the merchant that lived here, he was trading this stone. And you will see in this facade, there is no brick, there is no limestone, it's purely this stone from the Ardennes. So it's a really expensive facade. And it shows his craftsmanship. That's why he called his house in the stone mountain. That's what it says in Dutch there. And you can also see on top that the date when this building was built was 1669. So that was the time that we started stonifying our houses. So most of the times these grey stones are used for the windows because they are strong to cover the spans.
So they rent these windows out? Do they rent these spaces out for the windows? Or?
Well, these are all,
they're
shops.
all shops.
They're all shops. The shop behind me here is really interesting as well, because this beautifully carved stones, this facade used to be in a different street, and you can still see it, because it has house number 17 over here, but you can also vaguely see house number 9 over there. And that's because this facade used to be in a different street. And in the 1930s, when one of the big malls in that street expanded, they had to demolish a whole house block, you know how that goes. And they said, well, we have to replace this. We have to place it somewhere else because it's too expensive just to throw away. There's so much craftsmanship in this. First they wanted to put it somewhere else, and then eventually it was put in a depot. And in the 1950s, when renovating this area, the 2 houses that used to be here, they tore them down and they replaced it here. And the 2 houses were just a little bit wider than this facade was. So to the left and the right you can see a little stroke of bricks over there and over there, just to make it fit. So this little square was created in the 1950s when renovating this area. And when doing that, we started digging in the ground here because we knew this is the oldest part of Maastricht, what is underneath it. And what we found here was the old Roman bathhouse of the 2nd and 3rd century. And it's still underneath us, 3 meters deep. We cannot see it. Unfortunately, we didn't put a museum here because then we wouldn't have this beautiful square. But just to give you an indication, you can see in the pavement there are several different colored stones to indicate that there used to be a space over here. You can see all the foundations here are 3 meters below us. So we documented it, we photographed it, then we covered it up with silver sand, just for future generations. If they want to excavate it and do more research, they can. It's all well preserved underneath us. So this bathhouse was quite luxurious. They had floors that were levitated, so they could blow warm air underneath. So you had floor warming already 2,000 years ago. So yeah. And you could have a massage here or an oil treatment or whatever. So it was like going to a modern spa. So in contrast, 1,000 years later, this habit of washing yourself and going to a spa was lost. And people in the medieval times, they thought to have some filth on your skin is better because it keeps out the bad spirits. So then people would go to a bar once half a year or something like that, sit in a wine tub scrubbing their backs. But I prefer the Roman way.
Yeah.
Now he can ask the important question like, we or not? Oh wow. Normally, there's a statue of the Lady Mary in there, in this chapel. So if there was an invading army or a siege of the city, this was a place of last resort where the population could retreat and defend themselves against the invaders. So in the towers you can see that the windows are small. You could use them as shooting holes to shoot your arrows at the enemies. The big stones in the corner here, we can date them back to the Roman times, so we assume that they used to be from the castellum that the Romans built. The ironwork on the outside of the church, that's part of the construction, and it holds the beams for the floor. So you can see there's a floor over there and there's a floor over there. You will see that in more houses here in Maastricht. Sometimes they're richly decorated, sometimes it's nothing more than a bar, as you see over there. Sometimes they make a date out of it, so you can see which period that house was built. This is where I drink my beers. They have a jazz night on Wednesday evenings. I was talking about students. We also have a really nice and good conservatorium here. And the conservatorium students, they come and have their jazz evenings on Wednesday evenings here. So from 10 till close, they will play jazz here. So, and on Sunday evenings, the owner of the cafe, he plays with his blues band. So it's a really nice place to go out. And coming weekend, we have a jazz festival in Maastricht. So more than 75 performances in 3 days.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow.
So the building in front of us is an old water mill. It's still functional, and on Saturdays we mill an old grain here called spelt. It has less gluten, so it's a lot healthier. And with the spelt grain, where we bake our famous Limburger food pies. And we got a course today. So, on top you can see a wooden hopper. That's where we put the spelt in, and it will be shaken out gently and fall in between the two millstones. You can see an example standing over there. And the grooves, the pattern, they will transport the flour to the outside, and eventually it will fall down through the mill pipe and be collected in the bag underneath. So at the moment you see that the mill is not operational because one gear is up. So when the miller on Saturday mills, we will put that gear down, and then the mill will be in action. You can also see that the technique of making the gears is, part of it is cast iron of the 19th century, but parts of it are still older. And you can see that the teeth of the gear are made out of wood with pegs, so they can adjust them to make it perfectly round and to replace the teeth if they are worn out. See the water wheel. It's was renovated last year. The mill itself has been a mill here in this spot for almost 1,000 years. It's called the Bishop's Mill because it was owned by the Prince Bishop of Liège. side, you can see the first wall that we built. The first wall of Maastricht was built in the early 13th century to protect us against the invasions. We had 13 sieges during our history, and that's why we started building this wall. When we did, we made one big mistake, because we built it around all the existing houses and we forgot that we had to expand in the future. So within 100 years, the city already was too small for the people and they had to build a second wall. Eventually, this wall lost its purpose. You can see that because people started building their houses against it, because every stone that you didn't have to buy, it was penny safe, right? So that's why you see that this house is standing against that wall. Actually, this whole street used to be full with poor houses. So the poor people were living in this area, and they used this wall to make their homes. So every little arch that you see was the width of a whole house. And that's the area that you live in. What these little houses did was they preserved the wall from being demolished. So eventually, when we tore down these houses, we could reveal the wall again, and now I can show it to you again. So here on the other side, you can see in this building, there's a really big gap here. And this was not because of an earthquake or anything. It's because in the 1990s, this building, which belongs to the archive as well, just as is the monastery, it was renovated, and the architect took the privilege to make this statement. And what he's telling us here is that a city is always changing. Yeah, this tower is standing for something that was lost in the past. And what was lost was obviously the wall, because the wall was just going further this way. It was surrounding the whole city. So the tower also stands for the present and the future, because in front of our eyes we can see this building already crumbling down, and in the future something else will be built here. Nothing is forever. So that's why it says in Latin, I'm not what I used to be. So that's what it stands over there. So that's an interesting story as well, because Father Finch, he was convicted for the betrayal of Maastricht. And that's the story that takes place around 1632, the date that I already told you about, when Maastricht was liberated from the Spaniards by the Northern Army. It's the first time that Maastricht officially became part of the Republic of the Netherlands. The Spaniards obviously wanted Maastricht back. So what they did was they blockaded the River Maas, so there was no trade happening with Liège. And they had the plan of reconquering by bribing one of the soldiers. And the soldier, he had to buy a house near the city wall, which had a garden, and in the garden there was a little door that was shut. with stones. They said, well, if you can cut it open, then our soldiers can enter that and open big city gates. Well, a soldier with a lot of money, that was really suspicious. So authority pretty quickly found out. They took him to the courthouse and interrogated him medieval style. A fun fact about this wall, the part that you see sticking out there used to be water flowing underneath, and that is what we used to call a plunge toilet. Yeah, so it was a public toilet where you could, but your waste would be gone. I always find it interesting to see a lot of brides have their picture taken with medieval Dixie in the back. There's a young boy in the book that wants to become a musketeer. Do we remember his name? D'Artagnan. Yeah. And D'Artagnan, he was not a fictional character. He was a real person in history. He was one of the commanders of the army of Louis XIV. And in 1673, Louis XIV sieged Maastricht. And D'Artagnan, the musketeer, he was commander of the king. And the musketeers, they weren't waving swords. That's the romanticized musketeer. The real musketeers, they were shooting muskets, right? Musketeers, the first type of guns. So, for 2 weeks, they bombarded the city wall with the cannons that they had, and the cannons in that time were strong enough to breach the wall eventually. So, after 2 weeks, the wall was breached, and D'Artagnan opportunistically with his musketeers, they went to the breach to take the city, and ironically D'Artagnan was hit in the neck by a musket bullet, and he died here that day in Maastricht. That's this year exactly 350 years ago. The king, he was really sad about the loss of his dear commander. He was a personal friend of his. So that evening he wrote a letter to the queen saying, "Today I lost D'Artagnan, in which I had so much faith." And then his name slowly faded away in history. Until 200 years later, Dumas was doing research for his book, found this beautiful name and said, well, that's going to be the musketeer in my book. And his name started reliving. And we in Maastricht started realizing, well, we were the ones that killed him.
Whoops.
He must be buried here somewhere. Let's start looking for his grave. Guess what? We're still looking. I haven't found it yet. It wasn't documented where he was buried. We assume that he was buried in a church where, in one of the villages where the encampment of the king was, because the king always went to church, so he had this encampment near that church. So we assume that he might be buried in that church because he was an important person. And it was a really hot summer, so we assume he wasn't embalmed and sent to Paris. So, but yeah, you're in the city where D'Artagnan was killed. So we actually have statues here in Maastricht of D'Artagnan, so we commemorate our enemies.